Thank you for tuning in to Upon the Rock broadcast. I'm your host, Pastor Lawrence Shakir. I believe the Word of God will build a godly foundation in the lives of people. There is more available information on our website. You can log on to shakirministries.org. Now, let's go into today's message.
So, today I got a teaching talking about forgiveness or forgive. And I think it's a very, very sensitive subject because people in the body of Christ wrestle with this. Am I right about it? Now, we know we've been forgiven. And you can go to the next point. I'm sorry, sir. Thank you. So yeah, when it comes to forgiveness, it's not a thing that we can learn overnight. It's not something that you can just conquer for a season. It's one of those things that sometimes you have to keep learning how to forgive. And Christians, we're loving and we're saved and God has forgiven us, but we have trouble forgiving other people. And all of us in this room are, I think, guilty of it. Probably not them because they haven't grown to have grudges yet. Maybe they have grudges against each other. But what am I saying is that we have to practice forgiving because it's not an easy thing. Now, anybody here master forgiveness, please raise your hand. So I'm gonna let you teach today. So it's one of those things because it's very easy to hold in a grudge. It's very easy to kind of want to get back at people who has done us wrong, and you have to fight this thing on unforgiveness. And today, I think, because we're still talking about relationships, that sometimes in relationships between not only just a husband and wife, but son and daughter, or mother and child, there's some kind of rift that if we don't get this thing taken care of, we're going to discover how it can really destroy not only just our future, but destroy our lives and generations. All right? So everybody say forgive. So let's go to the next point, sir. What we got? In Matthew chapter 5, verse 38, I like this one I think it's out of the NLT, but it says, you have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. Verse 39, but I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other one. See, that scripture right there. Everybody has a problem with that one because it's like, you ain't gonna be slapping on me and then turn for the other cheek. It's like, why would Jesus say that? Does he want us to be walked over? Does he want us to kind of just, because people, if you're not careful, if you just let them do whatever, they'll keep on doing it. And then you don't want to be taken advantage over. But at the same time, Jesus saying that if somebody slaps you on the right cheek, then you offer the other cheek also. If someone sues you in a court and takes your shirt, give to him your coat. Verse 41, if a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it for 2 miles, give to those who ask, and don't turn away those who want to borrow. Now, again, this is not a teaching that says when somebody does you wrong, just let them do you wrong. That's not what it's talking about. He's trying to imply, how do you respond when somebody does you wrong? Because people are going to do you wrong for the rest of your life. And you could be the nicest person, but you'll always find somebody who's going to try to take advantage of you. Am I right about it? So when that happens, he's saying up front how you should respond. Because the Pharisees, they was talking about how, I'm going to let 3 strikes. It's even one part in the Bible where it talks about when somebody does you wrong, you forgive them. And then if they do it again, kind of still forgive them. And the third time have nothing to do with them. It says that somewhere. I didn't put that in the teaching. But when that does happen, you still can't hold the unforgiveness in your heart. Sometimes you do have to let people go. Did y'all know that? And it's very healthy for that because some people, their normal is havoc. And as long as you have havoc, and as long as they have havoc, then they have a relationship with you. So you can't allow that kind of stuff to kind of come in just for the sake of trying to keep the peace. And that's what I want to show you all. You can forgive the person, but you got to forgive the offense. You got to forgive the person, and you can't allow the offense to be attached to them. There's always some type of attachment when it comes to unforgiveness. And some people like to blame it on the person itself. They say, you're the person that hurt me. When it's not the person, it's the offense that hurt you, not the person. All right, so go to the next point. The prayer that some people really want to pray. There is a prayer that's in the Bible that everybody really wanted to pray. Let's see how David prayed. Y'all know David, right? David knew how to express himself to God. So let's go to the next point. David's prayer, watch this. They say, verse 6, they say, get an evil person to turn against him. Send an accuser to bring him to trial. When his case comes up for judgment, let him be pronounced guilty. Court his prayers as sin, count his prayers as sins. Let his years be few. Look at David. He's just going off, going ham on them. But he says, let his years be few. Let someone else take his position. May his children become fatherless and his wife a widow. Wow. Now, David had somebody that done him wrong. Let's keep going to the next point. May his children wander as beggars and they be driven from their ruined homes. This boy is going off, but that's how he feels. May creditors seize his entire estate and strangers take all he has earned. Let no one be kind to him. Let no one pity his fatherless children. May his offspring die. Sound like Tupac or something. May his family name be blotted out the earth in a single generation. So he was honest about that, and this in the Bible. And that's the prayer that some people want to pray on their enemies. And it's like that feeling is there, and you want to hurt them the way they hurt you. But Jesus saying, you're going to have to offer that other cheek. And it may take a lifetime for you to learn how to do that. Because you slap me one time, it's like, okay. Slap me again, and it's like you want to get a bat somewhere. And you start swinging and kicking them down and everything. But you can't allow that kind of stuff to cause you to have unforgiveness. Because in this teaching, what you're going to discover is that you can end up being like this. You know, let his children be fatherless and everything and die slow and all this kind of stuff. But it doesn't really help anything. And that's why we have to learn, you know, this section of forgiveness. Because everybody's going to have to deal with, not everybody has to deal with, you may have to deal with this at least 2 or 3 good times per year, maybe, when it comes to offense. Because, more than that? Okay. But sometimes you may need to take lessons in this over and over again because some offense keeps coming up. And they keep coming back, and every time you see that person, whether it's a family member, because some family members, they're not going to go away. And you got to love them because they're blood, but those people are the ones that you really need extra grace for, because you can't get away from them. You can get away from a stranger, a friend, a coworker, and you can kind of like cut them off, but you can't cut off family. They are your family, but they can get on your last nerve. And you're just trying so bad to kind of just maintain your composure, and you almost got to bite your lip off because you don't want to just tell them how it is. But you got to learn lessons, and this is what Jesus is trying to say. What's my next point, sir? I had this quote that came to me when I was studying this, and I think it was profound. I didn't hear it anywhere else. But anyway, rage has the ability to overtake you and destroy you. Forgiveness is the only antidote to stop the rage, bitterness, or vengeance from spreading. See, it will spread if you're not careful with it. Forgiveness is the very first step to restoring a relationship. So if you have a relationship and it's kind of iffy and it's rocky and everybody's walking on eggshells, forgiveness is actually the first step of restoring that relationship. You can't just cut them off, even though you want to. Am I the only one that wants to cut people off? No, everybody here, right? Okay, so if you don't want to allow that bitterness, because sooner or later that stuff will start to get in your heart and it produces almost like a sickness. And some people have ulcers, they have diseases, all because they're holding in unforgiveness. And if you want to get spiritual about it, it's a lot of people that will even die and go to hell because they have just refused to let people let them go. Or they just refuse to forgive that person. They say, I'm going to take this to my grave. And guess what? When they die, they will bust hell wide open because they did not allow forgiveness to take place. All right, what I got next? Point number 1, and I'm going to be parking the bus in Matthew. Let's just all go to the book of Matthew, chapter 18, verse 21. Just kind of park there real quick before we get started. But the word forgiveness comes from 2 words, or the word forgive comes from 2 words. For, of course, and give. And some of the things that I got when it comes to for, it means the front end, or for a part, or it means obsolete. Most people don't realize that. When you talk about for, that means you do something before anything else happens. You are the one doing it on the front end. So when you forgive somebody, or let's look at give. Give means to present voluntarily without expecting compensation. That's a real gift. When you can give something without expecting something in return. So when he says forgive, that means before everything happens, before the offense happens, before this person does this, you've given them this gift of, I'm going to let it go before it gets in your heart. Before they, I'm going to forgive them after they apologize. No, you can't do that if you're going to really be a forgiving person, because sometimes they're not going to apologize. They may take years. Some people are so stubborn, and they got a spirit of stubbornness on them, and you can do everything right, say everything right, and they still going to act like you're the wrong person. So when you forgive, you're going in the front end, giving this thing to them without any kind of expectation in return. So what if you forgive somebody and they don't forgive you? How do you handle that? Do you just well, I take my forgiveness back? You can't do that. If you're going to forgive somebody, you got to really let it go. Or when I say let them go, I mean let them with the offense go. Because again, some people you just can't get away. But just make sure, my point in saying this is make sure you're not the cause of havoc. See, because you can have that bitterness inside of your heart, and both of you all are bitter until to the day you die, and then both of you all can kind of have to stand before God before that. But you could be the bigger person by letting it go. Let them keep on acting crazy. Let them do what they want to do. But you're not holding in that offense anymore. Y'all get what I'm trying to say? All right. So give voluntarily without compensation. Grant an open quote to grant, in other words. A grant is, of course, you all know, especially if you do nonprofits, a grant is something they just give you to help you do something better, to help you get to another level. And so when you forgive, you got to, do this before, even though you may not receive any kind of compensation on the back end. So in Matthew chapter 18, verse, 21. Thank you. Anybody want to read that real quick? Just verse 21 only.
Then Peter came to him and asked, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times?
That's a good question, because the Pharisees said 3 strikes you're out. So they walking with Jesus said, well, you know what? Jesus is the Messiah, so we're going to double that. It may be 6, but I'm going to go an extra step and say 7. I think 7 is enough. And you would think that's good, but Jesus blew their mind and was like, no, not 7. If you're going to do better than the Pharisees, or you're going to do better than the religious people, if you're going to do better than people who just go to church because it's Sunday, then you're going to have to be the real kind of Christian, because they're asking, when can I cut somebody off? That's basically what he's asking. When is a good time for me to just cut them loose because they get on my last nerve and I just want to cut them off and be done with it? Should I do it give them at least 7 strikes? No. How about 10 strikes? No. And then Jesus said, what's the next verse saying? Verse 22?
No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, but 70 times 7.
70 times 7. In other words, Jesus wasn't giving you another number of 490 times. He was basically saying you just don't keep record of it. Don't keep count of it, because, you get people that like to keep count of how many times I apologized last time. It's your turn. You can't do that. If you're going to be a real Christian, you got to be mature and say, I'm not going to do that. So they was looking at how many times should I do this before I cut somebody off? And Jesus saying that if you're going to really live this thing and not have any kind of bitterness in your heart, you can't afford to go to your grave with any kind of unforgiveness. I don't care how bad they hurt you. And you know what? I'm not minimizing some of the hurt, because some people got some real issues, and some people has really hurt them, and they had gone on, they're died, or they moved on, or they living their life, and then the person is still the victim, and they don't know how to let it go because they got all these other kind of baggages that came up as a result of that hurt that happened when they was a kid, or when this happened. And so Jesus is not minimizing it. He's just simply saying that this is how you get rid of it, because there is a part that you have to play. Everybody getting anything out of this so far? All right. I'm on verse 22, but let me go right here. He says, I tell you not 70 times 7, verse 23. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like. When he says the kingdom of heaven, he's not saying heaven. He's saying the kingdom of heaven, meaning it's a system. It's a culture. It's a way of operating. It's a way of doing things. If I was to say I come from the kingdom of the United States, That means it's a certain way that I operate. If I was to go to Africa or Australia, they have a certain culture called the Kingdom of Australia or whatever. So it's certain things that they do that's normal to them, but it's foreign to me. And Jesus said the kingdom of heaven, he said there's certain things in God's way of doing things that's normal to God, but it's foreign to us. So when he says the kingdom of heaven is like, he's saying God's way of doing things is like this. So that's why he says God's way of doing things in verse, what was that, 23? Therefore, God's way of doing things is like this: a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man owed him 10,000 talents and was brought to him. In other words, 10,000 talents is almost like $100,000. Okay, so 10,000 talents. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all he had to be sold to repay the debt. All right, so the kingdom of heaven is like this, is that you have this kind of issue that's, he's saying basically God's way of doing things is that when somebody comes with this big issue that's over $10,000 and the Bible says that he could not pay, sometimes people, when they hurt you, they can't pay you back. There's no way for you to get back those years, no way for you to even get back some of those feelings because they hurt you or they offended you to that point that it's a major debt. You see what I'm saying? It's not just something that, oh, forgive me and I can just pay that and then we'll just make things right. Some things is too big where it will take your wife, your kids, your whole family, your whole generation, because it's not, it affects everything, not just you, but it's affecting the wife, it's affecting the kids, it's affecting the generation because they're all attached to this one thing. And that's how you get even, I'm gonna go as far as saying bitter parents. People who've been hurt when they was a kid and then they bring that poison down to their kids and the kids grow up like, why am I so angry? It's because they're picking up from what their parents said. That's why you got to be, generational curse. That's why you got to be very careful on what you allow to come in, because sometimes the world's view of what your parents says may not be the right view, but it's been distorted, it's been offended. And so now their poison is on side of you. And now you see the whole world as this person's against me. Or, and we can talk about culture and race. Some people, because you heard somebody else say this, now you think all these groups of people are the same way. So you gotta look at how some of these things that are so big that it's kind of beyond you, and you can't afford to let that stuff get inside of you. So my next point was, go to point number 2, if you don't mind. I'm sorry, but I can't pay my bill. Sometimes I'm sorry is not enough. Some people can just say, oh, I'm sorry I hurt you. But that's not enough. It's still a debt there, because he can kind of apologize and say, the servant, verse 26, the servant fell on his knees and said, be patient with me. He begged, I will pay you back everything. And so he basically saying, I'm sorry. I mean, I know I got this debt. It's legal. I did it, but I can't pay it. And sometimes that's what you got to look at people, is that they may be sorry for what they did, but don't let that ruin your life, because it has the potential to ruin the rest of your life, because you cannot afford, because you can't let it go. All right. But notice this right here in verse 27, the master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. I'm going to read that again. Verse 27, the master, everybody say the master. The master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. I'm going to say it one more time. The master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. Why are those 3 things so important? I think that's the path when it comes to letting somebody go in the right way. He says he took pity on them. In other words, you empathize, you have a heart, you realize perhaps some of their history. The reason why they act that way is because of what they've been exposed to. And then it says canceled the debt. In other words, you don't owe me anything. I don't expect anything from you. And then last but not least, let them go. Sometimes you got to just let the situation go, because it's going to stay there. The debt is still there, but he took pity on him. He canceled the debt, stopped it. I'm not going to move forward. In other words, I'm not going to move forward, but I'm just going to just now let it go. See, some people kind of just make it to the far as like, I'm not going to do anything else, but then they hold on to it. You haven't let it go. And that's how the bitterness or that kind of cancer is still in the heart, is because you're still holding on to it. The master let him go. So what am I saying? You have to become like a master at forgiveness.
Thank you for listening to Upon the Rock broadcast. If this message has been a blessing, you can help us spread the gospel by sharing this message with your friends. Also, if you're online, please be sure to contact me, either through our website at shakirministries.org or through social media. I would love to hear from you. Together, we can build a godly foundation in the lives of people. Until next time, please know that I'm praying for you, and I hope to see you on our next broadcast.